up, people? It's Matt from Music Producer School. Hope you're doing well today. It's another beautiful week to make some music. Today, I wanted to start the week's theme off. We're going to be covering synthesis. And the main point today I wanted to go over is, you know, we've all, I'm sure, been victim of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through preset after preset after preset, and some of us, I'm guilty, have libraries of thousands of presets for our synthesizers and our VSTs, and you just kind of get caught like scrolling through synths, scrolling through presets, just scrolling, and it never ends. So I wanted to get into synthesis this week. Again, I'm going to start it more on the beginner side, just so we're sure that everybody is kind of on the same page. But the main thing I wanted to get across today especially was that if you can learn some very basic things about synthesis and how it works, you're going to be a lot better off in the long run saving time. Because often we hear the sound that we want in our head, and if you're in the beginning of your production career especially, you're kind of just searching for that sound. And again, I'm trying to teach you how to be a problem solver, so I want to teach you how to be able to make that sound. And when I say that, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to make every synthesizer sound from scratch. What ideally, and what I like to do, is I may find a synth sound in a preset that I like, but I'm actually trying to tweak it a certain way because, again, I want it to function in a certain way. So, for example, let's say I had a synthesizer sound where I really like the sound of it, but when I hit the key and I let the key go, the sound lasts for too long. Or maybe there's too many synths stacked on top of each other, meaning too many oscillators, which, just to get the lesson started, so an oscillator, which often you'll see it written as OSC on a synthesizer, that's actually the generator that makes the sound. So all synthesizers are basically these sound generators, and they can have multiple oscillators, and when you combine these oscillators together, that's when you're going to start getting these interesting sounds. And then you add filters, which is basically just another word for EQ, and you start adding this stuff together, and that's where you start getting some of these interesting sounds from. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started, but real quick, as always, I wanted to invite everybody that's out there watching right now to be sure to go and join the Music Producer School community. Every Saturday I'm going over there, and I have a lot of people sending me their music. Saturdays in the Music Producer School community is where I will be listening to your tracks, and I'll be giving feedback, mixing, mastering, songwriting, sample selection, sounds, the whole deal. So that's where I will listen live. You guys and girls can come listen live with me. And I'm gonna be giving one-on-one feedback with you for your songs. So I just put that link in the comment. Be sure to join the Music Producer School community. I think we've got about 100 people in there now, and it's been fun. I'm learning a lot from just going through you guys' tracks and trying to help you out. So be sure to join that if you can. And also, if you're watching today, be sure to leave me a comment, say hello. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask, feel free to throw them out there. It can be about anything. I'll try and get to it today, but if not today, I'll put it in a future lesson. So let's get on with some synthesis here. So I'm going to start off in Ableton today, but I'm also going to do this in FL Studio. I know we have some FL users, so I wanted to try and hit a little bit of both of that today. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys is this plugin right here. If you're in really any DAW, it'll work, but I really like this one. It's called Smexoscope. It's called Smart Electronics is the company name. And what I like about this is it actually shows you Hey, what's up, Vanrick? Thanks for joining. That's cool. Thank you. I appreciate the comment. So I like this plugin to put after a synthesizer, and this synth right here is called Silent, if you've never seen it before. And what I like about Smexoscope is it's going to actually show you the waveform. So you're actually able to see what your waveform is doing. And I can slow it down. I can see more of it, and I can really zoom in there and see what it's doing. So I just kind of wanted to go through a couple different synths and go through the different pieces, because when you look at this stuff at first, it can be very intimidating. And I always wanted to try and, like I said, do it for the beginners. Hey, what's up, Gideon? Hey, Gideon, I was actually thinking about that today. I play guitar a good bit, so I'm going to do some guitar stuff. Not today, but I will cover that very soon. Thank you for the comment. I was just thinking about that. So these synthesizers can look very intimidating when you first, start them up. And like I said, most of us, we get a synth and we start just going through the plugins, or the presets rather. And let me go ahead. I have my FL synth on here. Let's look at the right one. Let me get the correct synth going here. Okay, so this is our Silent. So you see, we've got all this crazy stuff going on here, right? So what I wanted to show you guys today is just find whatever synthesizer that you like to work with, and find it's usually called the INIT, the initial, that stands for initial preset. So what I've done now is I've just set this back basically to the default. So now it's basically just, this is a sine wave. So you have these different types of waves, and you can see here in Silent, they have them kind of written out here. You have sine, saw. So I'll just flip through these really quickly. So this is the sine wave. And again, I like this Smexoscope plugin because you can see the actual wave. And you'll notice as I go lower on the keyboard, the wave gets longer. As I get higher, the wave gets shorter. And that's just the way sound works. So this actually relates to one of the mixing topics I was talking about. You can see how if I'm playing a note very low, it's probably hard to hear if you're on your phone, but if I'm playing that note low, the waves are very long, so they take up a lot of energy. Whereas the shorter stuff, you see those waves are a lot shorter, so they don't take up as much energy, and that has to do with volume. So we'll get back into that with mixing again, but that's just kind of how that works in the physical world. So we have in our waves here, we have a sine wave that I just played. We have a saw wave, sounds like this. And the main thing I would convey to you today is go through on your favorite synthesizer. Not all of them have this feature, but go through and play with the different waveforms, because you're going to actually start to learn what these waveforms sound like. So if you're trying to design your own sound or customize your own sound, when you know what the waveforms sound like, you can kind of get there a lot quicker. So this is called a saw wave. And all of these can be used to make any kind of instruments. This is a triangle, a pulse, a half pulse. So now we're starting to get into some of those they call 8-bit sounds that you might hear on like video games and stuff. Quarter pulse. Kind of sounds like some old video games. We have a tri-saw. And the final one we have is just noise. Now, when you hear this one, you might be thinking, oh man, what would I ever need to just use noise for? But this noise is actually very important and very helpful when you're doing your own sounds, and then you can also use this noise for special effects. So for example, if I put this on a low pass filter, and let's pretend, I think, so on this past Saturday, I was talking to one of our producer school community members about his track that I was listening to. And I was telling him, I said, hey, when you go from one section to the next, often it's cool, instead of just completely switching the section up, give the user a little cue that like, hey, something new is coming. Build a little anticipation. So check this out. Just by using this noise generator right here and this filter, you can do one of these like white noise sweeps like this. And that's all just using a noise generator. That's a white noise, it's called. But you can also use the white noise to combine with these other sounds. So let's say, for example, I had this saw wave, right? Now, I want to start going through the parts of a synthesizer, and that's kind of what I'm going to cover today, just so you guys can start kind of playing around with your own synths and start getting a feel for what's actually going on under the hood here. So what I would recommend when you're looking at this stuff is just kind of take it one part at a time. So up here we have polyphony in the top left corner right here. So what polyphony means, that's how many of these oscillators are going to be able to play at one time. So this one allows me to go, I believe, up to, I want to say this one goes up to 16, yeah. So if I start using this detune knob, and I change my voices here, so let's say 2, I've now doubled the voices. So when I start detuning, it's taking each of those voices and it's kind of spreading the tuning a little bit to make it sound wider. So that's how you start. Again, you can get into like special effect type stuff with this, but I just wanted to kind of briefly go over this stuff for you. So polyphony, we're using 1. We're just going to keep it simple, and I need 1 voice. Now, Silence that I'm using here allows me to do up to 8 voices per polyphony here, okay? So I'm just going to stick with 1 for right now. Keep it simple. So that's kind of the polyphony and voice thing. That's something, again, you just need to start playing around with this stuff to get yourself familiar with it. So the next thing you're usually going to have is a pitch option, where I can actually change the pitch of my oscillator. So listen, I'm just playing a C here. And now when I pitch it down an octave, I can go again. So that's useful when you start combining voices. So like right here, you see how I have oscillator A1. And then on the other side, I have oscillator A2. So both of these oscillators, and if you really look visually how they have it set up, it kind of makes sense. You can see oscillator 1, A1, and oscillator A2 are both feeding into this amp envelope, it's called. So this is where, again, that all-important ADSR topic that I covered a few weeks ago, and I told y'all this would be super important. So again, this is my attack, decay, sustain, and release. So if you're not familiar with that, go back on the Facebook page a couple weeks and you'll find me where I do the ADSR lesson. So again, if I increase my attack, it's going to take longer for the beginning of that note to come into full effect. So you hear how it's almost like a fade in. So I'm combining that with the octave. Let's go back up an octave now, a couple octaves. So you can see visually on the Smexoscope what it's doing. Watch how the waveform increases over time. Now, as soon as I let go of that key, you see the waveform disappears. It's very short. Now let me put my attack very short so it'll click right on. Now if I do this release and I pull my hand off, watch what happens. So that's where that ADSR stuff becomes important, especially for synthesis. So again, if you didn't see that lesson, go back a few weeks on the Facebook page or on my YouTube channel, and you can see where I went over all this stuff in detail. I actually drew out some graphs and stuff for you guys and girls to check out. So, okay, so we have pitch here. So let's go back just to 0 on pitch. Now note, what we can do here is we can actually change the note. So I'm hitting a C, but let's say I wanted to hit a C and make it sound like a D. I would need to go up 1 note for C sharp and then 2 notes to get to D. Now you might be wondering, okay, why would you want to change the note like that? Well, let me jump ahead really quickly and say, okay, let's turn down our volume here. So you can see on the oscillator we have our octave and our pitch notes. We have a volume here for this. This is for just this oscillator right here. So watch, I can just do the volume here. So if I turn the volume down there, and let's go over to oscillator 2 now. And let's give oscillator 2 one voice, just like we're doing on oscillator 1. And now when I play this, I have a sound. So let's do a pulse here. So let's say we wanted to play a C, but we also wanted to get a C major note going. So we could change this note. We go from C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. So 4 semitones right there is going to give us a major third. So now even though I'm hitting my C key, it's actually playing an E note. So watch what happens when I bring back in my original C, which is the first oscillator we had. So this is how you start getting some of those cool harmonized synthesizers that you may have heard like in dance music and stuff like that. So let's change this to a saw. And let's bring this down an octave. And then we can play with the volume here. And there's all kinds of cool, crazy stuff you can do with this. I'll get into that later on, but I have lots of tricks to show y'all about how that stuff works. So I just wanted to show you that's why you would want to be able to manipulate a note pitch, even though you're hitting a C key, but you want it to play a different pitch. So that's why that works. So let's get rid of this second oscillator and continue. So we have our volume. We're playing our saw wave still. We have detune. Let's skip phase for now. Detune. Now you notice my detune isn't doing anything right now. That's because in order to hear the effect of detune, we have to have more than one voice. So let's increase our voices to, let's do 3 voices. So now you can hear, we're starting to hear that effect with the detune. And then my stereo, which is how wide the sound is going to be, is at full max right now. So if we bring that back, we're going to have detuned, 3 detuned voices, but they're going to be all straight up the center. Now, most people tend to like the more stereo sound when you detune voices because it spreads them out and it sounds nice and wide, and I like it that way myself. So again, this is just stuff to experiment with, just so you can understand how this stuff works. Now, the phase, let me take my detune off here. The phase is actually, so you see how this waveform, let's go back to one voice here. You can see how the phase there, and the phase means just generally the shape of the waveform. So if I start to change the phase, let's see if we can see it on the Smexoscope. Let's see if we add another voice. Now, it's hard to see on this because it's moving so fast. Let's try the sine wave. Yeah, when I'm flipping the phase here, what it's actually doing is it's taking wherever the waveform is at the top of this line right here on Smexoscope, it's actually flipping it. And phase is something that's a little more complicated that we'll get into at a later time, but it also relates to mixing, and it's very important when it comes to your bass and your sub stuff. So we'll get more into that in detail, but just know that phase means wherever that waveform is, it's going to flip it on top of itself, and it's actually going to change the phase. So let's keep moving along here. Again, we kind of know now that our oscillators are going to feed into this amp envelope here, right? So then what we can do is, you see over here, we have filter A, and we can choose, and again, you got to kind of look visually so you can see what they're doing here. Oscillator A, it says, is feeding into filter A. We could also choose different types of filters. So right here I have no filter. Then I can do the low pass like I just showed earlier with the white noise. I can add a little drive, like a little distortion. So that's cool. And then I can also change the oscillators that I want to feed into the filter. So right now I've got oscillator A, and this silent, it's kind of tricky because we're on part A. We have a whole nother set of oscillators here in part B, which we're not going to fool with today, but just be aware that some synthesizers are set up that way. So now let's just go back to A, feeding our filter. So I could filter a lot of this off with a low pass, which means I'm only going to let the low stuff pass through. And I've got kind of a nice bass sound going now. So that's pretty cool. I have more filter control here, which is more of like an overall filter. So you can send which synths, which oscillators you want here, and then we can get more of an overall filter control. So again, this is just the basic stuff that you're going to see in pretty much every synthesizer. We also have pitch bend down here. So if you have a MIDI controller with one of those pitch wheels, this is how high or low your pitch is going to take it. I could take this all the way up pretty high. I think it goes 2 octaves up. And then this wheel right here, not every keyboard has this on it, but this is called a modulation wheel. And that's where you can get into some more of these modulation effects right here, which again, I'm just going to keep it super basic today. I don't want to confuse anybody yet. but just know that you have some more modulation stuff that you can use with this wheel if you have one on your keyboard. I believe my bigger, yeah, I have a bigger Akai keyboard that does have the modulation wheel on it, so that's something fun to play with to get some fun and cool sounds as well. So continuing on here, let's give us a little more of our sound. And then down here, the Portamento. This is an important one that a lot of people, they like the sound of it, but they're not sure exactly what it does. So what you can do here, this is where you can get this kind of sliding sound going. So you see here, if you read, I have a normal and a slide up here in the where it says current preset. Right now I'm on normal. So you hear it takes a while for it to get to the next note. And that's based on this Portamento time here. So you can do some cool like increasing type slide stuff with that. But what a lot of people like to do What this one does is it actually is the difference between, right now I have my note, my finger, you can see on the keyboard, I have my finger on the keyboard, and then I'm going to put another finger down and it'll slide up. Now what the slide function does on this particular synth is whatever note I've hit last, the next note is going to go and do that slide without me having to hold the note down. So the last note I hit was high, so if I hit a low note, it's going to slide down. Now, what a lot of people like to do is set this Portamento time to very quick. And now you can hear I start getting kind of that slide effect that some of you have probably heard in some of your favorite songs. So you can hear that's more of that quicker slide type sound. So this is some stuff in Ableton that I wanted to show y'all. Let me flip over now. Let me flip over to FL, because I know we got a lot of people out there using FL as well. And I wanted to show y'all kind of the same deal. So you have in FL Studio a good oscillator synthesizer to start using is this 3-time OSC, 3x OSC, because here you can choose your different waveforms just like I was showing you, and this one is a little bit simpler looking. So over here I have volume for my other two. So right now I'm only hearing this waveform right here. This is the sine wave. I have the square. And then you have the various saws and stuff like that, right? So in FL, you have this plugin called Wave Candy. It's under your visual, and it's called Wave Candy, right? So Wave Candy is kind of like the Smexoscope plugin I just showed you. You can pull this out, and you can actually, while you're playing with the synth, if you put it in a patch on your insert for your synth, we can actually see the waveform. And I just like looking at the waveforms, especially in the beginning, because it's a lot easier to visualize and it kind of helps you remember what the different waveforms are doing. So that's our sine wave again. So it's the same principle here as I just showed you in the other program. I can mix my volume of another type of waveform right here. And then we have again our detune. That's a little pan control right there. So you have a lot of the same stuff. It just looks a little bit differently. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you guys. And again, you know, if you're not familiar with how these things work, you're going to wind up just kind of constantly flipping through your presets just all the time and not really understanding. Hey, what's up, Shresh? Thanks for stopping by. It's all good. Vanrick, yes, asking about in Logic. Yes, Vanrick, the same thing in Logic. I don't have Logic on this computer right now, but it is the same deal. So all of this stuff, any synthesizer you get, I wanted to just go through some of this stuff because, again, Logic will have the same thing. You'll have different types of oscillator shapes that you can use, which, again, like I'm showing y'all here, you've got, it's always going to be the same shapes for the most part. Now, Logic does have actually, I believe in their synthesizer, I haven't used it in a minute, but you can actually load all these custom waveforms that are going to be able to give you just unique and interesting sounds. But the idea that I really wanted to stress today is you want to start learning what these different waveforms kind of sound like, because you may hear a sound that you like and you may be saying, oh, I like that sound, but it's too harsh. I want to use it for like a bass sound, but it's too harsh. So you're going to know, oh, okay, well, it's too harsh. I need to get rid of this more wave, this more square type sound. I need to go more, because again, the more square type stuff and the sawtooth type waves are going to be harsher. Okay, so if you're trying to do more like of a bass sound, you're going to want to usually stick with more of your sine wave type stuff. And that's, again, when you start learning how some of this stuff works, you're going to start getting into more of that and learning it quicker. Yeah, Shreth, this is, yeah, this is FL, Shreth. I started off in Ableton today. Yeah, that's cool. You can just rewind it when I'm done. I'm about to wrap it up here in just a second anyway. Thanks for dropping by, dude. So, again, if you go into this one on FL, you have the choice of all these different waveforms, just like in Ableton, like I just showed you. And then it's a little bit hidden. But again, what if you like this sound, let's say, but you're like, wait, I want to use this more as like a synth, and I want it to be more like a keyboard piano style where I hit the key and the note is going to last for a little while. Why is it just cutting off like that? That's because we need to go in and fool with our ADSR, which is the envelope stuff here. So again, we have all this stuff here. We need to learn how to use it. So we know that we want a higher release. So that way, when I let go of the key, you see how it's lasting now? And let's bring our attack back. So let's bring our release back a little bit. So now I just took that synth that was cutting off like this. And once you make something you like, now you can play it like a keyboard. And you can make that sound last as long as you want. I can go back. Let's say I just want something like this. Now that's more of like a keyboard type synth sound. So again, these are the types of things that you really want to start learning if you want to get good with synthesis, and you want to start not only just constantly flipping through presets, you want to learn how to design your own sounds. And like I said, you don't really ever have to just start from scratch. The reason I like teaching this is because you can find some presets that are close to what you want, but if you know how to manipulate the synthesizer, you can take something that's kind of close to what you want, and without having to go through another 100 presets, you can just say, oh, I like that sound, but I need it to be longer. I'm gonna crank the release up. Or you say, you know what, I like that sound, but it's a little too harsh. And you say, okay, let me try and use a different waveform. Or let me just take the saw wave and I'll just decrease the volume a little bit. Or maybe you like the sound and you say, man, I like that sound, but I want to use it as a lead sound, and there's too many voices going on. It's all spread wide and it's kind of not very focused. So I want to remove some of the voices and maybe take away some of that detune, and then it's going to be a nice straight up melody type synth. So those are kind of the basic things I wanted to cover today. I hope that was helpful for you guys. Shresh, thanks for the comment. I appreciate it, buddy. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, as always, be sure to send me a message or just leave a comment here. Don't forget, be sure to join the Music Producer School community so I can listen to some of your tracks there on Saturdays. And I think that's going to be it for today, you guys. I didn't want to go too deep into this just yet. Just give y'all a brief overview of how this works. And then the next class, I'll get a little bit deeper into it. So that's going to be it for today. Y'all have a great one, and I'll see y'all next class. Peace out.